Welcome back to another episode of the Sell Like a Leader podcast, the podcast for revenue leaders who are on a mission to cultivate a high-performing sales team within their organization. I'm your host, David Kreiger, founder of Sales Roads, America's most trusted lead generation and appointment setting company. And today we have a very special guest, Aaron Ross. You probably know him from his best-selling book, Predictable Revenue, which really set the SaaS community, and I think really sales in general, on a different trajectory on how they look at sales and creating predictable revenue. And I'm excited to have him on at this juncture in our sales history to talk about what predictable revenue means today and how things have changed over the past few decades. So Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, David. Interesting time in history, honestly, right now.
Yeah, not just in sales in general, right? It's everything is kind of interesting as as we live through these times. But let's talk about sales first. In one of your LinkedIn posts about a year ago, you had talked about how traditional sales strategies are falling short, and everyone is looking for new ways to get results. I think there's a lot, and we'll talk about, there's a lot of reasons potentially for this. Obviously, a lot of people point to AI, but there's a lot of other things, I think. And so I'd love to really unpack that with you today and how sales is changing, how sales leaders need to maneuver through this time, what to expect. Let's start with just the basics. When you say traditional strategies aren't working the way that they used to, what are you currently seeing break down?
I think captures a lot of the mood for a lot, not only revenue executives, but just a lot of people. And there's a lot of people who are excited and terrified. You could either be, more on one side or more on the other, kind of 50-50. And, for good reason, because, what's interesting, I worked at Salesforce.com and some startups. But I've also, for the last 15 years, had a family of 10 kids and working on new books, new ideas. And so while I still work with some companies, I'm on boards or sometimes do sales advisory and work on new sales books. And so I talk to people in the tech world, in the sales world, in the revenue world. I'm not in it myself, it's good and bad. It's challenging because I don't know the details, and honestly, I'm not interested in those. But it's good because of the outside perspective. I'm not caught in the echo chamber. And, I think generally people feel like, wow, the stuff that used to work doesn't work anymore. So playbooks do work, but not necessarily the copy paste from what you did 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And, big picture is what a lot of people in the corporate world, we're inherently drawn to the fact that it offers a lot of stability. You kind of know you can build a career. You'll be able to make money. You'll be able to get a job. I mean, there's always some uncertainty, but compared to a lot of other areas, whether it's music or there's so many science. So people are drawn there generally for opportunity and kind of like safe opportunity. Now, let's just leave aside the natural entrepreneurs. I'm talking about the bulk of people in corporate America. It's stable, relatively predictable, safe, and people are generally relatively risk averse, even in tech companies. There's a lot of founders who go into tech because it's a safe way to start a company now. It's like tech entrepreneurship is the well-paved road accounting, dentists, and doctors were in the 70s, 80s. There's this veneer of, it's risky, okay. But generally, it's like, if you're going to start a tech company, you feel like AI, for most people who are older, there's some younger people that hasn't hit them. But if you've been in the tech world, corporate world for more than a few years and obviously decades, AI and the other changes in the world, but primarily AI, is really accelerating. It's like pulling the rug out from under your feet. And that shows up in the tactical things like your SDR manager, VP of sales, or the marketing side, the same things, like the stuff that used to work doesn't. Now, it's not to say, so in other words, like you used to, when I was at Salesforce in its early days, or even a few years ago, you could create a technique, a marketing technique, a sales technique, and you could probably rely on that working for years without having to really change it too much. And that's changing now. You can't rely on it anymore. So again, it's kind of this, a lot of people who by default want to have something predictable, some sort of safe path, now it feels unsafe. And so I think there's an extra level of anxiety in the corporate world because the nature of the general psychology of people who go into it. And there's a lot of other things, but generally for most people, it's a safe bet. Again, like the old worlds of it's just a new version of the safe jobs of, prior eras.
Yeah. So let's dig into what is changing. Do you think it is primarily this inflection point of AI or generative AI that we've seen come on the scene? Or is there other things that are deeper at root here?
When I left, so I worked at Salesforce 2002 to 2006. And before that, I started a company that failed. But in 2007-ish, I worked with a VC fund for a bit, and I was studying the lead gen space. And I remember I did a presentation, and even at that point, it was kind of clear to me that just the general, because I'd been doing outbound prospecting at Salesforce and other things, but it's just clear that just the march of technology, ever since then, there's always more technology, and it's easier to create apps, easier to create new channels to send more messages. Like that was just an upward trend, and any new technology, that was just going to continue. And so what that means is people's buyers' attention, anyone's attention, is going to be a bit more fragmented, a bit more, it's going to be more noise, more overwhelm. So AI is just now accelerating that. So I think ultimately I'm sure there's other things at play, but the core of it is that when you've got a certain number of buyers and they've got a certain number, not just an amount of attention, but also a certain number of priorities, and you've got this explosion of not only messages and content, whether that content's coming over email or LinkedIn or newsletters, there's so many types. So there's this explosion of content and this explosion of opportunities, right? You could do so many things now. So ultimately, what's happening is that it's kind of like this root level, people in this kind of corporate world, executives, managers, but even individuals, it's harder to say, like, what do I actually do with my time, energy, and my priorities? Or, okay, I want to grow something. What do I grow and how? And then, like, what tools? And there's just a lot more opportunity. And to be fair, AI is helping people think through that. So it's a bit like a hamster wheel where, as much as things change, they stay the same. So ultimately, like, for at least a few years, and I'm ignoring kind of robots and quantum stuff, AI, for the most part, I believe, is going to keep the general, the people who are working hard will just work harder and be more anxious and probably make more money. And, it's like the corporate hamster wheel is just going to spin faster for most people, unless you consciously step off that hamster wheel, whether, again, you're in a SDR role, choosing to work differently, whether you're in an entrepreneurial role, choosing to work differently, and kind of like taking a step back, which is, rather than getting caught up in all the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out and the fear of, or FOFO, fear of fucking up. Like, what do I actually really want to do with my life, with my business, with my team? And I can't do it all. So how can I kind of come up with a system to figure out, like, where my approach is, and kind of to maintain my sanity with the swimming in stuff, mental noise and opportunity.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things I want to unpack there. So first of all, I think AI, like you're saying, is an accelerant to the idea that people are getting inundated, and they were getting inundated before AI, right?
And they will after AI too. Yeah,
exactly. And at a time where I think everyone has decreasing attention spans, maybe just because of our devices or society or whatever, right? So and then also what I think you're driving at too, it kind of makes it harder for everybody in some ways to execute. And I think one of the beauties of your book and why it resonated so deeply was it was a roadmap for people in a very simple way to think about revenue and to think about how to make it predictable, right? And you broke it down in a way that people could understand. And that's why it stood, the test of time, and it's still, people still are executing based upon that playbook.
And the principles are still true, and even more true. And for example, if you haven't read it, or it gets really associated with just outbound prospecting, but really there was like a few key ideas. So one was that you need to separate the closing of deals from lead generation. And, for older people, for the most part, that, the old days, that was the same thing. You hired more salespeople to get more business. They would do their own lead gen and closing. Okay? So breaking out the different jobs to be done, sales specialization, that's more important than ever, even if some of those jobs are done by AI, whether they're AI or humans, like more important than ever. The more overwhelmed and busy the world gets, the more you need different ways to focus, be more thoughtful about it. So that's one. The other was different seeds, nets, and spears. Different types of leads need to be treated differently. And then, of course, just predictable lead generation, breaking it down into funnels and things, which now everybody does to some extent. But those are, and there's one other topic, I think a key idea, which didn't get as much airtime. A lot of the book was really about kind of sales management and really like collaborating with your team. There's one example where, in changing the comp plans, I, had the team review them and gave their suggestions and kind of involved the team to collaborate in creating new comp plans. So those are some of the key ideas. Now the tactics died. Nothing ever really dies. It just goes away for a while, then it comes back. Like direct mail still works today. Knocking on doors can work. Knocking on doors can work. Cold calls can work. All these things can work, including the referral techniques. But so the tactics are all different, but the principles are the same and actually even more important in my mind. And sorry, the last one was that ideal customer profile, which is just like really knowing who your ideal customer is. And those are still true. Even more important, the busier the world gets. I don't care. The whole AI thing, it's super interesting. It's going to change a lot, but there's some things that really aren't going to change that much. And ultimately, you still have to have humans in some loop, someplace. AI agents will take over lots of things, but we have lots of humans. There's going to be so a lot of stuff will change, like the way it works and the amount of technology and jobs, but a lot of stuff won't, which you'll still have humans who need to work with, who still want to work with humans and sell to humans and get help from humans. That's still going to be there. So again, there's more variety, kind of like the old channels that used to be just direct mail. Then it was like phone calls and direct mail, and phone calls, direct mail, and email. Then added LinkedIn, then added WhatsApp. So we used to have humans, and then we'll just add AI this, but we'll still have humans there. So it'll just be a more not complex, but there'll just be more ways that people work together and more ways that humans and AIs work together and buy and sell. But for the most part, the way that we work and it's still not going to change that much.
Yeah, so I think that there's a few principles I want to dive in there because I think that they are so relevant today and in some ways more, and people just need to go deeper on them. So my feeling with AI is we're going to see a lot more either specialized companies really going after very specific niches because you don't need to raise a whole bunch of money necessarily to go after a very specific niche. You can have one or two coders doing what a team of 50 maybe did back in the day.
And that's one second. So it's true, but the flip side is now you've got 50 more companies, so the noise goes up. So that's why everyone who's like, "Oh, I'm using agency," like, okay, yeah, but pretty soon anything that works well is going to get swamped by copycats. So again, running in place.
Absolutely. And so I really think that it's easier to create. It's so obviously competition is going to go up. So that's why being very focused on an ICP and maybe even a very like ICPs are going to become even much more narrow, right? Because you can really dedicate yourself to a niche of an ICP because obviously all of a sudden it doesn't cost as much to at least from a tech side to create something that is really meaningful for that niche. And because there's so much competition, you've got to niche down. So the principle that you have of really defining your ICP in this world, it's almost got to be either more defined for a specific startup. Large companies need to have divisions or groups that are focused on each of those niches because they can satisfy them. And so I think niching down and being very focused on that ICP, I think is going to be critical to sales success because then going to your point that you just said is the competition for any given niche or and if it's slightly broader, it's going to be harder to compete in. So the more niche you are, the easier it will be to compete in a very competitive world.
And something might change is that you might have a niche of AI agents who are the buyers, right? There's no relationship. You might have the shapes of jobs and shapes of companies and things are going to change. The principles will not. Ultimately, like there's probably a friend of mine told me a story. I don't think it's true. It may or may not be true, but it was a good story, and it's like it makes sense. So someone unearthed a Roman army manual from 2,000 years ago, and basically the issues that they were describing with the people, like in terms of management, were the same as basically today. People. Now, that could change at some point with Neuralink, and there's all kinds of weird stuff coming down the pipe here in the next several years, 10 years, who knows? But a lot of the again making money through like tech business work, all this stuff, there will still a ton that does change, but a lot that won't. Now I will say that something I think one of the biggest changes that I'm seeing is and predicting is that the way that we work in the corporate world. And by corporate world, it's like kind of the linear side of things, which is, hey, if I do X, I get Y. I'm going to build a company and I'll do these steps and then I'll get X and Y and kind of create spreadsheets. And the spreadsheets usually don't come true, but it's some you feel like you can kind of predict something. And I'm working on a new book with my partner in Brazil, and so let's call that linear mode, right? Because you can kind of spreadsheet it out: a lead gen campaign, a company plan, some sort of financials, and all right, it feels like that could work. Again, a lot of times the feeling is an illusion, but as we learned with COVID and AI, like you can have all the projections you want, as detailed as you want. They may or may not mean anything. Okay, but there's this non-linear mode, and I wish I had a better name. I really don't, but it's like where you can't, you kind of, maybe you need to know that you can't make predictions are going to be useless. You can kind of predict at a high level, which is maybe my family even. I want to continue to have better relationships with my family. I'm going to work towards that. Do I know what that really looks like? I really don't. I kind of know, or with a business in some areas. I experienced this in consulting, which is I kind of did, I created content, right? I wrote a book, wrote another book. I would do newsletters. And I kind of felt like if I just put good ideas out there, stuff will happen. And stuff did happen. Like I would get business. I made a lot of money. It was really never, though, something ironic for the outbound guy. Anytime I tried to do something in a regular, like outbound way or methodical way, it never worked. Didn't get anything. But when I just kind of trusted in doing things almost like emotional navigation, like I want to write a book, I want to do this newsletter, like I'm inspired by this, or I have to do this, get married, have 10 kids. Again, I can't explain how a lot of things I did led to making money, but they did. So again, it's this world of, I would call EQ, emotional intelligence, non-linear. You can't always really predict. You kind of have to trust. You have to trust in yourself. You have to trust in your agility, which is, I don't know what's going to happen. First of all, we don't know, like this year, we know there's going to be more surprises, unhappy surprises, probably some happy ones too, but there'll be more world shocks of some sort, tech shocks, world shocks, right? We just had this Iran thing. 100% that's going to happen in next year. We're in the world where the chaos temperature is going up because the more connected the world is, the more that one aspect in one world, ripples through and, hits another. So we're not going to have a more calmer world. I don't think ever. It's probably just be more drama. Drama not as like good or bad, but just like stuff happening, things changing. So what does that mean? I can't predict what's happening this year, and I can't get ready, really. I just have to be, but for me, it's not about being prepared. It's being like kind of ready. It's like being attuned to what's happening and being ready to kind of change at a moment's notice to do what? I don't know. And so again, our team in Brazil, it's okay. We have projections, we have thoughts, but a lot of times it's like we're just using that as loose guardrails for generally where do we want to go, and we want to be profitable. We want to have the team be strong. I'm just using a word here. Good relationships, and but there's so many changes that it's really more about it's almost like just like emotional agility, because we don't really know what's coming next week by week, and whatever comes, we're like ready to meet it. Because we're not locked into this, we have this projection, we need to hit these projections, and this is the way it has to do. We do A, B, C, D, E, like in some fixed spreadsheet. It's like constant iteration, almost like an evolution of, I think like a slime mold, right? You have this like culture, and it's like strong, and there's like some nutrients. You don't really know where it's going to go. It's just going to expand, and you just kind of see where it goes. Like that's kind of like more how I think. And again, we're still shaping how we're going to describe these in the book and like what this even means. But that's kind of how I think, more of an emergent approach versus something that's really like planned and executed and reliable over a long periods of time.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of these principles have been important, and we've definitely hired on EQ before, but in some ways these types of things are more important. First, just velocity of ideas. You gotta lean in. All of a sudden you can create a lot more things. You can spin up new ideas for sales ideas, or
spin up a lot of new ideas
so much faster. And so now there's no excuse to just getting it out there, trying to figure out what works, iterating on it. And you got to lean into the chaos and almost be a chaos agent yourself to be able to try more things, while at the same time, and I'll use the word again because I do really like it, the emotional agility. And as sales leaders, as executives, as people in society, those that have the emotional agility, who are going to be able to deal with this chaos, this fog of society.
Yeah, emotional agility, or words like taste. I think that's been thrown around a lot. Like, yes, taste. I think three things a lot are like creativity, relationships, and intuition. These are a lot of, almost by definition, a lot of the EQ stuff, the emotional intelligence stuff. Because in my mind, like right brain Like AI will take over a lot of the left brain things. So, we were very left brain dependent in the corporate world for a long time. Now, maybe it's more about how we balance IQ, EQ, or AI and EQ. Or it's not the EQ is like the important thing. It's more like an integration. But you have strong IQ with AI, and I get the frustration. A lot of people are like, well, how do I develop my intuition, my taste, my emotion? These are difficult things to explain until you have enough life experience. It's almost like it's just hard to even describe it. It's hard to describe it. So I feel for that. And I feel like I've developed a lot of mine, again, through having a very intense life for the last, especially 15 years with so many kids. And not just like in supporting them, growing the family and making money, supporting them physically, emotionally. It's like going through a sausage grinder and coming out to the other side. And like, how'd you survive the sausage grinder? I'm like, I don't know. Actually, so it is tricky. I'm sure there are some things that, again, whether through this book or AI, how do you develop EQ but yeah, I feel for it. But again, by definition, this area is not easily built into a copy paste. How do I become higher EQ? Do these 3 things. It just doesn't work that way. So it's almost by definition a frustrating exercise where you kind of know these words and yeah, that makes sense. But like, what do I do?
Yeah, and sort of coming back to what you were saying at the beginning, if people go into the corporate world wanting stability, wanting less chaos, in some ways, at least with certain parts of emotional intelligence, that's one of the harder ways to go through the sausage grinder and build some of those types of things. And so it seems like if there are ways to challenge both our kids, people coming out of school, to try to, and again, it's a little cliche, but maybe it's even more important now, to take more of those risks to build that EQ and to try different things, because those skills are in some ways more important as they go through life.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking like, actually go doing some specifics, like the things that we encourage, or at least I'll say I encourage the kids to do, or if I was giving advice, or what do I do for myself? So I've kind of been having to reinvent myself the last 5 years and like how I work and how I make money. So with the kids, I feel like they go to regular schools, and there's so many different kids, like 5 are adopted, and they're different ages. Some are working, some in college, some are younger, and so there's never really been like one school, one system that works for everybody. But they do go to regular schools. We looked at homeschooling things; it just never worked out, like for us. But I think, given that, still, like if they have interests, like supporting their interests, encouraging them, but not pushing. Sometimes pushing them, sometimes not. It's kind of like a taste thing. It's like how often do you push and how often do you give them space. I think you only develop that through practice unless you have some inherent instinct. So that's one area I think is really important, because by the time they're in the workforce, a lot of the regular school skills may or may not be relevant. Like it's more like, okay, if they keep themselves organized? Do they, I don't know. I don't even know. But the interest thing I think is really important, as well as being confronting difficult things and just doing them. So whether that's chores or conversations, my wife's really good about that. So I think those are 2 things, right? So if notice when you're avoiding something and just do it if it needs to be done. And the other is like, what do you want to do? What are you interested in or excited by? And I feel like that question can be really tricky for people in their, once you're out of college, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And so that is something I've been working on the last 5 years. It took me, I got out of a business divorce with a prior business partner in business. And for a while, I was like, I know I need to do something that really fulfills me, like something I want to do, like something I enjoy doing, the activity that I enjoy, and then to make money from it. And I had no idea what that was. And it probably took me like a year or 2 to kind of have some different like glimmers, clicks, and sparkles around, oh, okay, I just love books. So I want to do new books and help people do books. And, I always like public speaking, right? So kind of like books of different types, not just sales books. I got like half a dozen I'm kind of working on with some myself, some with other people. And then like speaking, and I realized, partnerships really work for me. So I have different business partnerships, and not more 50-50. Like someone needs to be kind of the operating person. I'm more of an amplifier. That works really well. Yeah, and then the 4th thing is crafting. And I just kind of like realized this recently, but I was having fun, like actual fun using AI to develop like custom coffee brands and like these funny, I call them banana peel wisdom cards, but these like funny tarot cards almost. And I got a typewriter here. So these physical artifacts and crafts that I'm planning on, this year will be like executive gifts, whether I send them out just for fun to friends or people I know, like my handwritten letters with the wax stamps, or actual like corporate marketing. So I get some friends. I'm doing these card decks that are funny. Like it's about, it's like Dilbert from Dilbert, like, but making fun of like tech. And they'll send out these decks of cards to people, customers or people they want to have meetings with. And we say like a sense of humor is a good indicator. If they don't think it's funny, they're probably not going to be very good to work with anyway. So like, anyway, these different areas are ones that I'm really drawn to. Like I want to do these things anyway. I'd fit vibe coding into the crafting part, but I haven't found something I really want to make. It's kind of fun, but I would like to do it, but I haven't found like a project I really want to do. And so, again, if you're in there, it's like really trying to disassociate the ROI in your head between, oh, I want to do something, but is it going to do X, make me money, or how's it going to help me? No. It's like, how can you just tune into like, what do you actually want to do, and take away the if then, right? If I do this, then I'll get that. And it's like, I just want to create books. I just want to do cards. If I didn't make money, I'd still do it in some way. That's, I think, a really helpful place to tune into. And again, it took me like a year or two. I was pretty burned out at that point. So it might happen sooner. You might even know what they are. There's a lot, and I'd be doing lists of stuff I want to do, and like it just over time, it's just kind of like going for walks and sleeping and exercising. So for me, it was like trying to sleep, and the kids are getting a bit older at that point, so sleep is a bit better, getting into regular exercise-ish, and then continuing to kind of think about what are these things, and that helped trigger new ideas and in a bunch of areas that I'm really excited about. And I think AI is really going to help the stuff I'm doing, and it's not really, it's like new books and speaking and into partnership stuff and these kind of cool crafts. I think it's really going to help, and I don't feel like there's a threat in my world right now, because it's kind of like these things are like extensions of me and my interests, and the way that I do them will be, even if someone copies them, because they've already done that, it doesn't really bother me. It's kind of annoying, but this is all stuff I have fun creating, new stuff, new book ideas, and if I have good partners, so I'm not too worried. It's led me to interesting places I could not have predicted when I just kind of let go and said, what do I want to do? And over again, in 5 years. But now I'm at the point where I kind of have these new projects. I'll make money from the new stuff this year. And at some point, I'll make more money from these types of things I really enjoy doing and things that I love doing than I ever did doing sales consulting. And I made a lot of money doing sales consulting and speaking.
Well, I think what you're talking about is the exciting part of AI, especially for folks like you, for folks who are more entrepreneurial. And it's going to be a
like creativity enhancing.
It's so, what folks have been able to do on TikTok for content over the past, 5 years, people who are just creative and want to create businesses and new ideas and put things out into the world, all of a sudden, you don't need all of these different people or whatnot to be able to just try something, play with it, do it. It's a passion project, and maybe it'll turn into something, but you get to just
yeah, it's fun just taking an idea to a mock-up.
Yeah. And so the explosion of ideas and people, it's going to unlock, I think, for people who want to be able to go on that creative journey, it's going to be a beautiful thing where it will be challenging, going back to what we talked about. And then I went in with a little bit of the job specialization side of things, but is those folks who do want that security, and those folks who do want that structure. And so the question,
someone's going to create something to, there's going to be like jobs and, people, there's going to be enough of a demand that new things will be created to create that type of, structure. It may not be as profitable for, I don't know. There's just too much demand. There'll be too much available talent.
Yeah. I think there's definitely something to that. I think when you increase the number of businesses that are being created, even if they need a fraction of the people, they're still going to need people. So there's more opportunities. I do think even those jobs, though, will be if you think about our parents' jobs, or at least especially our grandparents' jobs, the stability was much, much higher, at least in the corporate world back then, and then has gone down. And we're going to see it even being probably less so, where there's more churn in different companies you work for and things like that. But you're right.
The good news is stress has gone up at least.
Right. We love it. We're making society better.
That's the thing, is everyone it's like in AI lets you work. People aren't going to work less. Most of the corporate world, it's like, what was it, Elon? I don't know. Some of the AI people are like, people aren't going to have anything to do. I'm like, Have you ever met a technology that didn't just create more work at the same time? No. People will create more, there'll be more stuff created, more slop to navigate. So I don't know how it's going to shape up, but it's not going to be some clean, I don't know. It'll be a lot of good stuff, a lot of bad stuff, aka change, and bad actors and good actors. But I think there'll still be a chance, again, if in the style of like working hard, people will still be able to do that and make money and get and really overwhelmed and anxious. And to get off that, I think it's going to take more of that conscious choice, which is there'll be more opportunities to make money on your own terms, but to do that in a way which really feels like you and you're differentiated. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to do that. I'm one of my books later this year, I hope, it's called The Grind Must Die, which would be kind of that career reinvention. So I don't know, it's going to be interesting. Whatever happens, it's not. I don't see the world getting any less. I don't see it getting more boring. Which you could take that for however you want to take that. Yeah, or both. Yeah. But they say the old Chinese curse. I think it may not be real, but it said, "May you live in interesting times."
It's true. I think that the time, I'm super scared and excited for the future at the same time. I'm super fascinated by what's going to happen. In many ways, if I could push a button, I might stop what's going to happen at the same time. So it's a bizarre world that we live in. And I look at, going back to the kids, my kids look at like the 80s when I grew up. Oh, that was so different. You didn't even have phones and things like that. Their kids are going to look at the times they grew up and be like, that was so weird. That's so different. Like, you didn't have robots. You didn't have we came up with.
You had to drive your own car.
What was that, right?
But by the way, I will say, like, it does feel like this moment for people who are kind of, let's say, our age, maybe even 30s, like, we get to experience the magic of not having AI and then having it, because it does feel like magic. And people who grow up with it, they won't know that. They might go through the not having the Matrix and having the Matrix, their version, because I feel like the technology changes will probably keep accelerating. But it's pretty amazing to go from, if you stop and don't let yourself get caught up in the habituation, because that's the whole, humans habituate to whatever we get. That's why people are like, oh, we'll have all this free time and universal basic income. And I mean, yeah, but we're still going to be frustrated and unhappy unless you work on your mindset. But it's pretty amazing. Like, it's just like magic if you stop and just really like think about it and remember what it was like a couple years ago. So yeah.
Yeah. We are. I get mad at my AI when it's taking too long to think now. And it's like spitting out RFPs and things like that for me, and I'm getting mad that it's taking too long. Like, it's kind of crazy. But going back, so I do want to end with something that you talked about from your book that I think is really interesting in how we look at sales today and how sales leaders look at it, and look at the principles you espouse in your book that I actually think are more relevant today. And that's the concept of job specialization, right? You had come up or at least popularized and really explained very clearly to people how specialization in sales, from the SDR to the AE to customer success, all those things are so much more efficient when you can have specialization. And what you said at the beginning of this podcast, I think, is interesting. And that's that all of a sudden, we can now maybe break that down even further, where AI has certain jobs that it does for an SDR or an AE and whatnot, and you need to maybe further define it. So all of a sudden, you go from 3 or to multiple. And so I guess, what are your thoughts on that, and how do we look at job specialization in the age of AI?
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple. Like, and again, in the predictable revenue, and even from impossible to inevitable books, the example was in the B2B world, 4 core roles, right? Outbound prospecting, inbound lead response, signing new customers, and account management or customer success. Yeah, that's just more of a generalization of the idea that specialization is a principle. You might have different jobs. I mean, if you have a soccer team or European football, you say, like, you've got a goalie, you've got midfield, attack, and defense, and a coach. It's the same thing. So it's not about doing the jobs, outbound, inbound, close, and renew. It's about what are the jobs that you need to be done, for your business or your function. You do it in coding, or at least used to, with back-end, front-end, UI, QA, and so on. In marketing, in sales. So what are those jobs that need to be done, and divide and conquer so people can do fewer things better. I think that's going to be the same thing with AI and agents. I'm not a research professional, but I'm thinking it happens in the natural world, like with bees and ants, and there's probably some exceptions. I don't know slime mold, maybe not, but in nature there's a lot of specialization. So it conserves energy. I'm sure there's some principles in nature around specialization that would apply when people study AI and when AI develops its own stuff. There'll probably be some parallels in how AI decides to better allocate resources and specialize. But I think that's just a fundamental kind of building block. Now, you might decide to specialize if you have in these days, like enterprise, huge customers, and so one salesperson might specialize in doing everything in one company, right? So again, you have to think about, it's not just the copy paste these types of jobs and you divide the jobs up. It's what needs to happen here, and how can people do fewer things better, or people and agents do fewer things better. And I saw someone's post online yesterday, AI is going to kill the SDR, BDR, the junior salespeople. I don't know, maybe there's always a need for humans in the loop someplace. I don't know if it's true, but I saw that OpenAI was hiring a head of sales development. So there's always going to be companies and people that want a human touch. That's not going to change. There'll be some people that don't care, some people that want a human touch. So I think there's some people who never want to talk to a human when they buy, and there's some that'll want to talk to a human sometimes, and there's some that want to talk to a human a lot. That's going to be the same in the future. I can't tell you the proportions, but so humans are going to be around. There's no job that will die, although they will evolve.
Well, let's end on that optimistic note. Yep. And what I would love to do as we wrap up here, Aaron, is hit you with a few rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And so I'm going to shoot a few questions at you, and would love to get your perspective on each one. Sound okay?
Yeah.
All right. What is one thing people don't give enough value or attention to in leadership?
I talked with my Brazilian partner about this. We call it good vibes, right? It's kind of like tuning into whether you call it intuition or your emotional navigation for what may feel right, and not being too dependent on data. Using it, but not being dependent only on that.
So vibe predictions or
eternal emotional navigation, kind of feeling out what's right.
What's one skill you advise everyone in sales to master, leaders or non-leaders?
I think really taking off your sales hat and putting on your Sherlock Holmes / Columbo hat. There's not enough curiosity, inquiry, discovery. And you could be whether you're coaching someone or you're in a sales cycle.
Favorite business, leadership, or sales book?
I would say, probably Wooden. I read this in my early days at Salesforce.com, and it was incredibly influential on my kind of management style and even my very first book. But yeah, it's called Wooden, about John Wooden, the UCLA basketball coach.
Yeah, he's a legend. Amazing. If people have not checked that out, I definitely recommend it too. Favorite quote, mantra, or saying that inspires you as a sales leader?
It's something to the effect of we'll figure it out. Again, I know a lot of people want to have clarity of the future, but a lot of times the future will be clear by figuring it out step by step, day by day. So we'll figure it out. How are we gonna do that? I don't know. We'll figure it out.
It's a good core value. What is the most important goal or project you're working on right now?
A lot of it is taking these projects that I've done. Again, there's books, talks, these crafts, these executive gifts, and two parts. Finding there'll be customers who they'll make money this year, so kind of going to market with them. But at the same time, it's still maintaining how can I keep up my enjoyment and the fun and excitement about working with these projects and my partners with them.
That's nice. Awesome. Well, Aaron, really appreciate you taking the time and chatting with us. If people want to connect with you, learn about what you're doing, how do they find you these days?
Probably the best place would be my Substack. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, but Substack is freshair.substack.com. But I'm sure I'll put stuff out on there. I'm not a regular writer, but that's LinkedIn or freshair.substack.com.
Aaron, appreciate the time. Thank you all for listening to the Sell Like a Leader podcast. Please hit me up anytime on LinkedIn too with ideas, questions, guests you want to see on the pod. And until next time, may you live in interesting times.